Doug Thompson here. We're at the shop.
I've been asked by a friend of mine to help him build a gate at his house, and I've got some pretty precise dimensions I've got to hold.
We decided to make half of the gate now, install it, and then we'll measure up for the other portion of the gate. I'm here at the fabrication table. I've got a perfect square. I've already blocked out here, 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 and here, so I can access some particular welding points. We're going to use some cylinder hinges and cap the tubing, and I'm going to kind of go all through how you build a simple gate and my method to do so. So I have the 3 verticals cut, the post is going to weld to an existing structural element, the hinge tube, and kind of the latch tube. I'm going to just cap them with 1/8 by 1.5 by 1.5 caps so that I can just weld all in like that. I've tacked the little caps on the 1.5 tubing. Now I'm going to fully weld it, and I'm going to do a vertical down weld. And I don't want to spend a bunch of time grinding a weld. I want to be away about 1.5 inches. Okay. That'll be good, and that'll support the other one. And then the same thing here. We're going to touch off on this. This method of essentially contact points is better than lining it all up against here, because the chances are you got a little chip in there, a little bow in the material. I want, as best I can, to have a contact point there and a contact point there. Now, we're going to use these cylinder hinges, and I have found you want to shim the tubes 1/4 inch apart. We're probably going to come down 6 inches. 6 inches will be the center line of the cylinder. So I'm just going to measure down 6 inches. I just need a mark there. I need a mark here. Roughly 6 inches and 6 inches. Okay.
Yeah, it is.
Is that the whole my welding company? So, welding. Just a little tap. And I'm feeling with my thumb to make sure I've got good surface alignment. That's enough. So we're at the point where we've got to put a tension member in for 2 reasons. One, to keep the gate strong and square, and also we're going to have a piece of sheet metal that's going to go all the way from the bottom to the top, and this will support that sheet metal. We've chosen to make the material for the tension member out of the same material for the gate, so that on both sides it's flush. We have a choice to make. We can either cut along the horizontal axis or the vertical axis. I tend to choose the axis that will result in the shortest cut. If we were to say that this gate was just, say, 4 feet by 20 feet, and we selected to have the tension member land on the vertical element, we would have a 4.5 inch cut. But if we swing over to the horizontal element, we have a very short cut, almost 1.5 inches, the same as the dimension there. So what I'm going to do is line up the tension member such that I can cut where this is the end, and I'm going to cut on the horizontal axis. So if I go like this, I can mark thusly. I'll mark it twice, and I'm going to call this the bottom. Sometimes I'll locate. I'll say, okay, this is alpha and this is alpha. So when we put it back together, we know that this is how it went back together. So I'll reference the part. I'm going to take this over to the bandsaw. I'm going to cut it off. Now, I've got a line there that's a little bit on top of the all of the tube. I'm going to swing this line over to where I don't have to cut through this wall. I'll be able to get it. So this is actually the line I'm going to cut. So I'm going to start the bandsaw not on this vertical edge, but just inside it to cut it. I've got plenty of material on the other side to do that. I can't mark that angle, so I'm going to flip the part over, and that end is good. Then I'll come to here. I'll make another mark. Now with this one, I have no choice but to cut through the entire wall of the tubing. And I'll still do that with the bandsaw. So that's the cut I've got to make. And I'll cut the line so I have a little bit of space for the weld to enter in as I do it. So we could do that. It's going to fit nice and neat. So welding sequence matters in terms of keeping your project square or whatever condition you need it to be. And the amount of weld that you put on is going to affect how much you have to grind and polish and all of that. And on this project, I've done a bunch of these gates. I've done a lot of gates. and I know how much weld I need to put on, so I'm never going to have failure, and I don't have to spend a bunch of time grinding it off. If indeed I have to grind after welding. Okay, so I've got my little tack here. The next weld I'm going to put is down in this very corner, as far away from this weld as I can to lock that in place. So I'm going to put a little weld here, and then a little weld up on top, and this corner will be done. I'm going to go around and do all the corners like that. So I'm going to put one little weld here, and then one weld here, and I'll put one weld in there. This particular weld, I want to build it up a little bit so when we go to grind it, we can grind and follow the corner curvature of the existing bar. So I'm going to stack a little bit of extra weld there to be able to grind and make a smooth, elegant corner. So as a quick tip, I'll weld it from the inside corner to the outside corner. I found that that will give you the least amount of distortion. So in this gate project, if I weld this face and the opposite face and the outside face, that's plenty of weld for that corner. Absolutely. I'm not going to weld the inside corner. That's the corner that bends your project. If we're going to sandblast it, prime it, paint it, after sandblast, we'll prime it, we'll put the caulking in, then we'll paint it. The paint will cover the caulking to protect it, but if I can, I'm not going to weld these inside corners. On this diagonal piece, I'll weld it on the top and the bottom. That's plenty for this project, plenty of weld for that project. Ask yourself, why am I welding this joint? How much weld do I have to put on this joint? What are the downstream processes that I'm going to have to engage in to finish the project? Sanding, polishing, painting. And now what we want to do is we want to weld the cylinder hinges from the hinge tube to the gate. My preferred method is to use the cylinder hinge with the pin up. I'm going to close it like this. I've got a mark here. I'm then going to take these copper shims and put one shim on this side and one shim on this side. I'll then press down and put a tack here and put a tack here, pull the shim out, tack, pull the shim out, and tack. I want the cylinder hinge to rotate in free space, slightly above the tubing. Because if I don't have these shims, this is going to rub the entire time. That's not the way I do it. So again, I'm going to have the pin going up. The socket will be welded to the gate. Pin will be welded to the frame, such that if it were to rain, there's no way that the rain can get up into the socket, which I'm going to grease anyways. But if we were to turn it around like this and weld it in this configuration or this orientation, there's a chance that rain could get into that socket and rust it up. That's not going to be a real issue if the gate is constantly being used. But if it's a gate in the backyard that is used once every 5 years, I fear that the rain will get in there and rust that up, and then the gate won't open and close. I'm actually going to cut the lower pin about 1/4 of an inch off so that when I put the gate together, I can align the top hinge and then the bottom hinge will go in, so I don't have to do both simultaneously. I'm going to utilize the fact we've got this really strong corner, and that's where I'm going to locate the hinge. I'm going to make sure they're closed. I'm going to put pressure down, and right in that corner,
there you go. Just this go. There you go.
going to go ahead and weld right there, and then that hinge is locked in place. We're going to go ahead and weld the gate and gate tube to this post, and then once we get it all situated, then we can measure from this point to here, and we'll build the active gate. This one's actually going to swing out, and this one is going to swing in. Going to just like this. Pretty good. Over to see what this is. And so there's a little bit of a gap here. This tube is so thick that I'm able to sweep back and forth with the welder and fill that gap. So I'm just kind of walking back and forth. seat up. I'm going to start here, and I'll just weave back and forth to put the weld between that big gap. We've installed the inactive gate. We're going to block this up. We've got a piece of tubing here and tubing here that goes into the ground that's going to hold the gate. So we're going to align this gate as close as we can to this post. We've already have some of the pieces made for the active gate, but we're going to build everything right here. So we're going to kind of demonstrate how to carry this plane, this vertical plane, from one to another. We also have to have a fairly precise dimension here in terms of separation. We're using a mechanical lock, and so I want to have a 3/16 inch gap here and here. And just because of the way we're building it, we really don't have a lot of tolerance. We're going to be on the inside of tube to inside of tube. So we have some constraints, and I feel like this is probably the best way to approach this build. So we'll get started. Watch this tube right here.
Yeah.
And we want this and this to be good.
Level, you mean?
Yeah, good to each other, whatever it is. Yep. Okay. So what we're going to want to do is put this here and this here, and that's going to pretty much, that'll be our layout. From floor to center of lock is about 40 inches.
We'll separate this a little bit.
And we'll do the same thing at the bottom. Okay, no, I don't want to be in. So obviously I would not want to clamp in this space. I want to clamp in this space, so we're okay. Okay. Yeah, it feels pretty good. So now we want to clamp this one up. And we got to figure out when we clamp that, we got to separate that. Is that too? So what I want to do is I'm going to clamp right at this location. So we just want to be on top of this, John, and we'll come across. You tell me when you like it. Right there.
Is that us?
Well,
I can see the ballpark.
That's close enough.
okay. Now we'll check it and see. Well, I think it's good.
Okay.
So we want 32 and an 8. That's going to be our double check.
What's that?
We'll just put it right there. If we're going to have an error, that way we can just tap it in. So, and I probably can take my, okay. Tack the top right there. By pinching it, like that, you should be able to just come. Okay, that's us. Now, where did you tack here? In the top.
Yeah.
So, tack the bottom.
Got it.
And I'll keep it. Nice little weld. So we're kind of at the end point of our field build. We've got everything pretty much tacked together. This latch tube is spaced 3/16 of an inch. We leveled this up, leveled across, clamped up. We're holding a specific dimension here, 3/16 of an inch. Our first move was to carry across this tube from one side of the project to the other, such that the top of this tube was good with the top of this tube. We then cut and tacked the 1.5" tubing here, just got it tacked. Then we went to the top and we leveled across, tacked that, and then we measured from this point up to get that equal, but we also stood back and looked at the project from afar to make sure that everything looked right. Sometimes, even if something measures correctly, but it looks off, I'll move it a little bit because people aren't going to be watching your tape measure. They're going to be looking at the end result. So that tends to affect the last little adjustments that I'd make on a project. We have it barely tacked here and there. Everything lines up. So now we're going to weld it off. What we'll do at the job site, I want to put a hard weld on the top. And if I could get at the very bottom of this one, I'd weld it, but we'll just weld the faces. What I don't want to do is I'm not going to weld here, and I'm not going to weld in this inside corner. None of the inside corners are going to receive a weld. That will bend our project. So the 3 welds, the 2 face welds and the top weld will be more than sufficient for this project. Okay, you liking that?
There you go.
So get it, let me kind of get it good down here too. Do it.
There you go.
I think it all welded up. Good. John definitely didn't want that to come off. Look, 73 5/8. And I'm going to hand you this. Slide it all the way to get our corners knocked up. What we're going to do is clamp this off here just for a second. Like that. This, let's say 400 pounds, we might be able to do it. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to just eyeball center, okay? And you're going to hold this underneath and put your glove on and lift up on like that. And right. Wherever your hand is, I'm going to weld it. Right. That's going to be good. We're going to go, if this is 4, that's an inch, so we're going to be 3 inches off the edge. Just tacking it for right now, folks. Okay, now we got to test this thing. We want, how far down? Almost the bottom of the They're on. Ready, let me know. Okay. It's us.